I've been married to my wife for 8 years, together for 11.
On paper, we looked solid, shared routines, inside jokes, plans for someday. But about 3 months ago, something shifted.
It wasn't one big red flag, more like a dozen small ones piling up until the room felt off.
She became sharp with me over nothing, snapping like I was an inconvenience she hadn't agreed to host. She started guarding her phone like it contained state secrets.
Notifications silenced, screen always face down.
Our conversations turned transactional, who's picking up groceries, who forgot to pay which bill, while anything emotional was met with eye rolls or accusations that I was imagining problems. I told myself it was stress, work, hormones, anything but the obvious.
The first real crack came the night she didn't come home. No call, no text.
At 1:17 a.m., she finally messaged, annoyed, saying she crashed at a friend's because her phone died.
I apologized for overreacting.
That's the part that makes me feel stupid now, how quickly I learned to doubt my own instincts. After that night, my body stayed tense like it was bracing for impact.
I started noticing patterns I'd ignored before.
She began working late twice a week, always on the same days, always coming home energized instead of exhausted. New clothes appeared in her closet, stuff she'd never wear for me, tags gone, explanations vague. When I asked, she accused me of monitoring her and turned it into a fight about control. Her stories stopped lining up. One morning she said her coworker Jenna drove her home. That evening, Jenna apparently didn't work there anymore. I caught these inconsistencies and watched her double down instead of correcting herself, like lying was a reflex.
The warmth between us evaporated.
She barely let me touch her, flinching like my hand was an interruption. The worst part was the way she looked at me, annoyed, almost resentful, as if I were in the way of a better life she'd already started living. I still didn't have proof, just this growing knot in my stomach telling me I was about to lose something I hadn't agreed to give up.
The proof didn't arrive dramatically.
It slipped in quietly, like everything else. One afternoon I was looking for a charger in her car because mine had died.
Her glove compartment was a mess, so I opened the center console instead. There was a second phone.
Not old, not broken, newer than mine, fully charged, no case.
My hands actually shook.
I told myself it was a work phone, even though her job never mentioned one. When I powered it on, there was no lock screen photo, no name, just a string of unread messages lighting up the screen. One preview said, "Last night was insane.
When can I see you again?" I didn't scroll. I didn't need to.
My chest went hollow, like the air had been vacuumed out of me. I put the phone back exactly where it was and sat in the driver's seat for a full 10 minutes, staring at the steering wheel, trying to decide whether my life had just split in two or if I could still pretend it hadn't. I didn't confront her right away.
That's another thing I hate admitting. Instead, I watched.
I paid attention the way you do after you already know the ending but keep hoping the story will change. That night, she came home humming, dropped her keys, and kissed me on the cheek like she was doing me a favor. I asked casually if she'd been busy at work. She rolled her eyes and launched into a rehearsed rant about deadlines and useless coworkers.
The ease of the lie stunned me. She didn't hesitate, didn't blink.
It was like watching someone perform a role they'd practiced. Later, she went to shower and left her real phone on the couch. It buzzed twice.
I didn't pick it up, but I didn't need to. The name on the notification wasn't anyone I recognized, followed by a heart emoji.
When she came back, she snatched the phone instantly and accused me of hovering.
That's when denial finally cracked. Not shattered, cracked. I realized this wasn't paranoia or insecurity.
Something was actively happening behind my back, and she was daring me to catch up.
The next morning everything escalated at once. She forgot the second phone at home.
I found it on the kitchen counter, plugged in, screen lit with a message still open.
This time I didn't stop myself. I scrolled.
There were weeks of messages. Plans, jokes, complaints about me. She called me emotionally exhausting. She told him I was basically a roommate. Photos were there too, selfies she'd never sent me, smiles I hadn't seen in months.
One message stood out: my husband suspects nothing.
I felt stupid, angry, and weirdly calm all at the same time.
My hands went cold.
Before I could process it, she walked in, saw the phone in my hand, and froze. For half a second, her face dropped the act. Then it snapped right back into place.
She laughed. Actually laughed. Said I was invading her privacy and being dramatic.
Claimed it was just flirting, just attention, nothing physical. Even with the messages right there, she tried to rewrite reality. That was the moment I knew this wasn't just an affair, it was a full-on war with the truth.
I asked her to sit down. My voice didn't even sound like mine.
She refused, pacing instead, arms crossed, already on the offensive. I told her I'd seen everything.
Not hints. Not guesses. Everything.
She smirked and said I always jumped to the worst conclusions. When I mentioned specific messages, her tone shifted.
First irritation, then anger.
She accused me of spying, of breaking trust, of humiliating her. Somehow, in her version of events, I was the problem. When I asked her directly if she slept with him, she hesitated just a beat too long, then said no, followed immediately by "it wouldn't matter if I did."
That sentence landed harder than any confession.
She said our marriage had been dead for years, that I was boring, predictable, safe in the worst way. Every insecurity I'd ever shared with her came back sharpened and aimed straight at my chest. She cried only when she realized I wasn't backing down, and even then it felt calculated. The fight ended with her storming out, grabbing her keys, and saying she needed space.
She didn't come back that night. I didn't sleep.
I sat on the couch with the lights off, replaying every sentence, every insult, every lie. The house felt unfamiliar, like I'd broken into someone else's life. Around 3 a.m., she texted me to say she was safe and to not make this harder than it has to be. By morning, my anger had burned itself out, leaving this heavy, aching sadness. I called in sick to work and just existed in the silence. Her side of the bed was untouched. Her coffee mug was gone. It felt deliberate, like she was already practicing life without me.
Later that day, she showed up unannounced. No apology. No guilt. Just demands.
She wanted time to figure things out but expected me to stay faithful, supportive, and calm. When I asked if she was still seeing him, she snapped that it was none of my business anymore. That was when the reality hit me fully. I wasn't her partner. I was a convenience she hadn't disposed of yet. Once the shock wore off, it turned inward. I started questioning everything about myself, my worth, my judgment, my memories. I reread old messages between us, looking for the exact moment I stopped being enough.
It was exhausting, this constant mental autopsy.
She called sporadically, always when it suited her. Some days she was cold and dismissive, acting like I was a nuisance. Other days she was oddly soft, nostalgic even, telling me she missed what we used to be.
Every call pulled me back into confusion.
I realized she wasn't torn, she was keeping options open.
I stopped eating properly. Sleep came in short, broken bursts.
Friends noticed something was wrong, but I couldn't bring myself to explain it out loud.
Saying it made it real. In quiet moments, the anger returned, not explosive but steady, simmering under everything. I began to understand that betrayal doesn't just break trust with someone else, it fractures the way you see yourself. Just when I thought I'd hit emotional bottom, she called crying. Said the other guy meant nothing, that she'd ended it, that she wanted to come home and try. I wanted to believe her so badly it scared me. Hope is reckless when you're bleeding.
She came over that evening, hugged me like nothing had happened, and talked about therapy, fresh starts, honesty.
For a moment, it felt real.
Then her phone buzzed while she was in the bathroom.
Same name. Same heart emoji. Same timing.
When I confronted her, she didn't even bother denying it this time. She sighed like I'd caught her in a minor inconvenience and said she hadn't technically lied because she was in the process of ending it.
She told me I was being dramatic again, that healing wasn't linear.
That was the lie that finally killed the last part of me still reaching for her. Not because of the message, but because of how easily she watched it hurt me and chose herself anyway.
Something shifted after that. Not loudly. No dramatic speech, no slammed doors. Just a quiet, solid resolve settling in my chest. I told her to leave. Not to cool off. Not to think. To leave. She looked genuinely surprised, like she'd assumed I'd always be there no matter what she did. She tried one last tactic: anger. Said I was giving up too easily, that real love fights harder. When that didn't work, she went cold and said fine, that maybe this was for the best anyway. She packed a bag without rushing, without tears. That hurt more than the shouting ever did. After she walked out, I changed the locks. My hands were steady while I did it, which felt surreal. For the first time in weeks, the house felt quiet in a way that wasn't hostile. Empty, yes, but honest. I realized clarity doesn't come from answers. It comes from deciding you're done asking questions to someone who only speaks in lies. I thought once she was gone, I'd feel relief. Instead, grief hit me in waves. Not just for her, but for the future I'd been carrying around in my head for years, the trips we never took, the version of her I thought would grow old with me. Losing that hurt in a quieter, deeper way. Mornings were the worst. I'd wake up and reach for my phone out of habit, then remember there was no good morning coming. I cleaned obsessively, like order might fix what chaos had done. Some days I felt strong. Other days I couldn't get off the couch. She texted occasionally, usually logistical stuff, sometimes emotional bait. I stopped responding unless it was necessary. Every message reopened the wound a little less than before, which I took as progress. Grief, I learned, isn't proof you made the wrong choice, it's proof you actually cared. After a few weeks, I started reclaiming parts of myself I hadn't realized I'd lost. I went back to the gym, reconnected with friends I'd neglected, and even picked up hobbies I'd abandoned. Every small victory, a quiet morning with coffee, a night out laughing with friends, finishing a book, felt like reclaiming territory she'd taken without asking. I journaled. I cried. I yelled into my pillow. I allowed myself to feel all of it without guilt. Slowly, I realized I didn't need her permission to exist fully. I could grieve, rage, and heal on my own terms. Most importantly, I stopped expecting her to change. Not because I gave up on her, but because I finally stopped giving her power over my emotions. My life was mine again, messy and painful, but undeniably real. By the time a few months had passed, I could finally reflect without raw edges cutting me. I learned that people can surprise you, not always in ways you want. I realized that love isn't enough when respect is absent. Trust isn't rebuilt with apologies alone, it's earned over time, and sometimes it's irretrievably lost. I also learned to listen to that inner voice I'd ignored for months. That nagging sense that something was off wasn't paranoia, it was intuition. And finally, I learned that walking away doesn't make you weak. Staying in a toxic cycle makes you weaker. My anger faded, replaced by clarity and a quiet strength I didn't know I had. The betrayal left scars, yes, but also a map. A guide to spotting lies, recognizing red flags, and valuing myself above someone else's whims. With time, I started imagining life differently, not as half of a pair, but as a whole person. I made plans that didn't include her, goals that were mine alone. Vacations, career moves, even small weekend routines became exercises in reclaiming autonomy. People warned me that loneliness would hit hard, but it was different. It wasn't emptiness, it was space to breathe. Space to rebuild. I even began dating casually, but cautiously, aware now of red flags I'd ignored before. Trust would take time to restore, but I understood it started with myself. The future felt uncertain, yes, but it was mine to shape. For the first time in years, I could plan without fear of betrayal lurking just a few steps ahead. I was learning that freedom and self-respect mattered more than holding on to a life that had become a lie. Looking back, I can see the entire experience as a brutal lesson in self-worth, boundaries, and honesty. I survived betrayal, not because I'm stronger than anyone else, but because I refused to let it define me. Pain doesn't always break you, it can teach you who you are when everything familiar crumbles. If I could give one piece of advice to anyone in a similar situation, trust your instincts. Don't ignore the small signs because hope is comforting. Protect your heart, but don't let anger or fear trap you forever. Walk away if respect is gone, but don't lose yourself in the process. In the end, the hardest part wasn't discovering the affair, it was accepting that I deserved better. And once I did, life slowly began to feel like my own again.